Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Tales by the Fire.
This week we have another story installment.
We will continue The Champion's Quiet and explore Chapter 12. Please sit back and relax.
If you enjoy the story,
Please hit the like and subscribe buttons.
feel free to ring the bell to be informed of new content. And express your opinion and ideas by leaving a comment below.
As always, your presence is welcome and appreciated.
The Champion's Quiet. Chapter 12. Dawn did not arrive so much as it relented.
The darkness over the camp thinned from pitch to charcoal, from charcoal to a bruised gray that revealed shapes without offering warmth. Torchwood popped once, then went quiet again. Boots scraped softly against packed earth. A baby cried somewhere inside a tent, then stopped, as if the child had learned the night's lesson. Don't announce yourself to whatever is listening.
The camp had been a living thing yesterday. 100 small noises, 1,000 motions. Now, it moved like an animal that had been kicked hard and didn't yet know whether to bite back or crawl away.
Havner and Lyra stood at the edge of the clearing, already half gone. They looked wrong together, not mismatched exactly. More like two different kinds of blades set in the same sheath. Havner wore dark leathers worn smooth by years of careful violence and a certain out-of-place wealth. His elven features arranged into a neutrality so practiced it bordered on absence. Lyra carried herself like a drawn bow that never quite relaxed, her presence alert and coiled, her green eyes trusting nothing she had not tested herself. She looked less like a woman and more like something the forest had learned to tolerate. Valera faced them without ceremony. She did not try to inspire. She did not try to comfort. She simply led, the way a storm leads.
Seal the well.
She said.
Do not fail.
Lyra inclined her head once.
Failure echoes longer than success. I prefer silence.
Then Lyra turned to Havner and spoke as if the camp didn't exist.
Move, huntsman. The woods noticed us an hour ago.
Havner inclined his head. Not submission, not defiance, just simple acknowledgement. Before turning, he glanced once at Thurston. There was no apology in that look, nor was there reassurance, just a shared understanding. We were each chosen for different burdens. Then, Havner and Lyra stepped into the trees, and the forest swallowed them as if they had never been there at all.
The camp felt thinner afterward. It was empty somehow. Thurston realized that he was being separated from a friend.
Thurston spent most of the day in a state of motionless agitation. He helped where he could and stayed out of the way when he couldn't. He watched the Fae dismantle their lives with grim efficiency, bundling tents, loading carts, speaking only when necessary. There was no laughter. Nobody sang. Even the children were subdued. Doolin lived. That fact clung to the camp like a held breath, a debt that hadn't decided what shape it would take yet. Thurston found him in the healer's tent, pale as candle wax, the poultice on his abdomen glowing faintly as it drew poison from the wound. Doolin offered a weak smile that looked like it cost him more than life itself. His eyes kept flicking toward the entrance.
Valera passed often. She did not linger.
Her presence did more than words ever could. She was the cold edge of consequence. Doolin was keenly aware that his fate was in her hands.
You will live.
She told Doolin without softness.
so that you can answer for what you've done.
Dulin swallowed and nodded, the gesture small as a mouse trying to apologize to a hawk. Thurston wanted to say something, anything. But the truth was, he didn't know what justice looked like in a world like this. On Earth, justice wore uniforms and carried clipboards, and sometimes got it wrong anyway. Here it wore crowns and old magic and the memories of people who'd been chained.
Outside, the camp tightened into itself. Guards doubled. Fires burned lower. Nobody looked into the trees longer than they had to.
Thurston drifted to the edge of the clearing and stared out into the black forest. He felt watched, not by eyes exactly, by something older, like a history that wanted him to understand he was in its way.
His staff hummed faintly in his grip, as if it had its own opinion on all of this. As dusk bled purple and rust across the sky, Valera found him. She didn't ask anyone where he was. Queens with magic didn't have to.
It's time.
She said. They walked away from the thinning camp, past torches guttering in the evening wind, and into a grove where ancient standing stones leaned against each other like weary survivors. Scarred, cracked, but still upright. The air felt changed here. It was still, listening, alive and thick with memory.
The runes on Thurston's staff glimmered softly, as if recognizing an old familiar place. He didn't like that.
This place remembers.
Valera murmured, stepping into the ring of stones.
The veil is thin here, scarred but not sick. There is a small opening, a sort of crack that you can pass through.
Are you sure? I'm a pretty big guy now.
It is not about size in the way you understand it. In the words of Lyra, you will fit through, big guy.
Valera's laugh caused Thurston to smile, remembering the Valera who was once called Sandra in his world. She turned and faced him, the pale crescent on her brow catching the dying light.
Stand opposite me.
Thurston obeyed, planting his boots in cold grass that looked too ordinary for what was about to happen. He looked at her, and she looked back. For a moment, Valera questioned her decision. For a moment, she thought of her love for this man. And in the next moment, she knew why this had to be.
You must hold to who you are.
Valera continued. Her voice was barely steady, but it carried a weight that made the words feel older than the stones.
The veil will try to take you apart, memory by memory. The staff will anchor you. I will hold the path. Do not let go. Not of yourself and not of me.
He nodded, and the gesture felt too small for what she was giving him. Valera closed her eyes. Thurston took a minute to look at her beauty and burn her image into his mind. Then, light built from the circlet on her brow and spilled into her hands. Shadows between the stones thickened, folding inward until the grove felt far from the camp, far from the world, far from anything that had ever been safe.
The staff knows how to find the path,
She whispered.
Let it seek the way.
Then she bent forward and kissed Thurston.
In that moment, Thurston felt at peace. He did not unleash the power that surged from his staff through his arms. He held it, let it settle, let the staff's weight sink into his bones. The runes warmed in his hands.
The air tightened.
The veil opened a portal.
No thunder, no explosion. Just a vertical seam forming into an arch of absence darker than any night. its edges flickering with impossible color. Within it churned storm and memory and potential. Futures and failures tangled together like drowning thoughts.
Go.
Valera said, pain living in the word.
Go now.
Thurston met her eyes. He could tell they were about to tear. He wanted to say something that mattered, something meaningful, something that didn't sound like a man walking away from the only person who made him feel like he hadn't wasted his whole life. Instead, he nodded, a promise he hoped he could keep. Then he stepped forward.
The veil unmade him.
Cold, stripped thought from flesh, names unraveled. Regret pressed sharp fingers into places he thought had long healed. He saw his home on earth, quiet and stale, a place that had felt like a waiting room for a life that never started. He saw his wife's face when she didn't recognize him. He heard his own voice saying, "It's okay, honey. It's okay," while knowing it wasn't.
The veil didn't show him memories like photographs. It made him feel them again, raw and unbuffered. Like the universe was trying to see if the pain would make him drop his staff and his essence would scatter into nothing. For a heartbeat, maybe longer, he forgot what he looked like. He forgot what hands were for.
Only the staff remained. Weight, rhythm, certainty. And Valera remained too, burning behind his eyes, not as a picture, but as a lifeline he could follow.
He kept pushing forward. The storm thinned.
Then, suddenly and painfully, stones slammed into his knees. He gasped. Pain cleared his mind, his lungs seizing on air that tasted of pine and frost. For a moment he lay there, shaking hard enough that his teeth clicked, and the stars overhead looked like a cruel joke. Too many, too sharp, too indifferent.
When the world finally resolved, it was clear it was not the world he knew. Mountains loomed, jagged black silhouettes against a sky crowded with unfamiliar constellations. A violet moon hung immense and watchful, casting long shadows across snow-dusted ridges and dark evergreens.
The air was clean. It was cold.
Thurston staggered upright and turned. No portal, no seam, no archway, and no way back to Valera. Only stone, wind, and his own breath ripping out of him in white plumes. He was alone.
Well, I guess I'm committed now. I'm in yet another foreign world. How exactly do I get myself into these situations?
The first hour was shock. The second was denial. By the third, the cold started arguing with him in a language his bones understood.
The ledge he stood on narrowed quickly into a path that hugged the mountainside like it was made only for goats. Loose scree shifted under his boots. Frost glazed the stone in deceptive sheets. One wrong step would send him tumbling into fog that swallowed everything below him. The staff helped, but not in the way he wanted.
It steadied him. It found purchase. It hummed with faint irritation whenever he slipped, as if it were tired of being treated like a walking cane by a man who thought size and stubbornness counted as skill.
He muttered at it once, an actual argument with a stick, and then stopped, realizing how close he was to losing his mind already. The wind sharpened. Snow began to fall in light, dry flakes that did not melt when they touched him. They clung to his beard and lashes, turning him into a moving statue of the world's indifference.
He followed the path because there was nothing else to do. The mountain offered no choices, only consequences. and those appeared very dire. As the ledge curved around a rocky outcrop, the ground suddenly gave a little under his boot. Not a collapse, just enough to make his stomach drop.
He jerked his weight back, and the staff slammed down, biting into stone. The runes warmed, almost annoyed. Thurston stood there for a long moment, breathing hard. He could die here. Not in a heroic battle, not facing Bane walkers with righteous fury. Just slip, crack his skull, and then freeze to death. Valera had sent him here as if it was an answer, but maybe it was more like a gamble. One big possibility with absolutely no certainty.
At this point, I think I'm betting on the house.
Thurston said. Thurston began questioning their choices. Maybe she was wrong.
That thought came fast and hot, and it scared him worse than the wind did. Because the only thing he had to hold on to, besides the staff, was the belief that Valera did not send him away to die.
He kept walking. By late in what might have been afternoon, time didn't behave right. Under a violet moon and unfamiliar stars, he reached a point where the path split. One route climbed higher into jagged rock, vanishing into blowing snow. The other dipped toward a forested valley where dark trees stood like a congregation waiting for a sermon. Thurston stared at both and realized something simple and ugly. He didn't know which way was the right way. There were no signs, no markings, no helpful fairy guide popping out of a mushroom.
Just the mountain and his ignorance. He closed his eyes and tried to feel that pull in his chest, the compass feeling that had led him to Valera through worse places. It wasn't there.
Of course you can't feel her. She is in another world, you big idiot.
Instead of a pull, there was only the staff's hum.
Not direction, not guidance, just awareness.
You are here, it seemed to say. Now decide. He chose the descent toward the valley, not because he was sure, but because his legs were shaking, and the thought of climbing higher felt like volunteering for punishment, and maybe death.
The path down was worse.
Snow covered stones, stones covered ice, ice covered holes that wanted your ankle. Twice he slipped and caught himself with the staff, jarring his shoulder hard enough to make him grunt. Once, he slid a full yard before the staff bit into earth and held.
He was sweating under cold air, the worst combination. Damp meant danger. Damp meant you froze faster when you stopped moving. So, he kept moving.
By the time he reached the tree line, his calves burned, and his feet had gone numb enough that he couldn't feel his toes individually anymore. He could feel his heartbeat in his fingertips. The forest did not welcome him.
But it was some shelter, at least. The wind dulled between the tree trunks. The snow fell softer, filtered by the overhead canopy. The trees here were massive, dark bark ridged like old scars. Their branches interlaced high above, muting the violet moonlight into a dim glow that made everything look like a dream half remembered.
A deep stillness lived here, not oppressive like Blackwood, not watching like a predator. It was just plainly an uncomfortable place to be, and this made Thurston uneasy.
He walked until his legs threatened mutiny. Then he found a shallow overhang of rock and crawled beneath it like an animal trying to be small.
He made a fire with shaking hands and extreme effort he could not describe. The wood here was dry but stubborn, like it didn't appreciate being asked to burn. When it finally caught, the flame was small and weak, more insult than comfort. He ate what little he had, hard bread, and a strip of dried meat that tasted like old salt and sweat socks.
Then he sat there and stared at the fire until his eyes watered. His mind kept circling back to the Bane walkers.
Not their robes, not their eyes, the way they had made him kneel.
Not by force.
By certainty, Hovner had said. He hated them for that.
He hated himself more. He was aware that in this world he was mostly just making it up as he went. He had never been a fighter, and he knew he was no warrior. He knew he had grown overconfident with his successes using his newly found brute strength.
Something about being forced to kneel would never sit right with him. In the small hours, with the fire dying and the cold creeping in, he found himself whispering Valera's name like a prayer, and then hating himself for how much he needed it.
Sleep came in fragments. In one of them, he dreamed he was back on Earth, standing in his home hallway, holding the staff, and someone inside the house was calling his name in his wife's voice. But it wasn't his wife, and he knew it. When he opened the door, the Bane Walker was sitting at his kitchen table waiting for him to serve breakfast or something even more humiliating. He woke with his heart pounding and his breath ragged in the cold air. The fire was out. The night was still, and the staff hummed in his grip like it had never slept at all.
Morning, if that's what it was, came with a flat gray light and a deeper hunger than before. He could still see the violet moon, but it looked different.
Thurston stood, stretched aching muscles, and discovered his shin was scraped and swollen from yesterday's fall. Blood had dried in a dark crust. The cold had tightened the skin around it, so it pulled when he moved. He limped for the first mile, then forced himself into a steadier stride, because pain didn't care about your schedule.
The forest opened slowly into a valley, and the valley was beautiful. Not soft, not friendly,
But beautiful in the way mountains are beautiful. Sharp, uncompromising, honest.
pines stretched in dark seas across slopes. Snow lay in thin sheets on higher ground. A river cut through the valley, its water so clear it looked like glass that had decided to move. Thurston stopped and stared. He felt small, in a good way and a terrifying way all at once. He followed the river because rivers meant life, and life meant someone might exist here besides him and the trees. Hours passed. He began to doubt Valera again. Not because she lied, because maybe she hadn't understood what she was asking him to do. Because maybe she believed in him more than he believed in himself, and more than reality. His stomach gnawed. His fingers were cracked from the cold. His breath was raspy. He came to a narrow crossing where the river narrowed between rocks and thundered over boulders. The sound was loud enough to make him feel less alone, which was a sad thing to admit. As he rounded a bend, the trees thinned and a clearing opened. In its center stood a single massive tree, wider than any he'd seen, its branches spreading like a roof over the clearing. Beneath it sat a hut made of stone and wood, smoke rising thin and blue from its chimney. Warmth, relief, suspicion. He approached cautiously, staff in hand. The door of the hut was open, but the interior beyond looked dim, sparse, no movement. Then the hair rose on the back of Thurston's neck. He turned slowly. A man stood at the edge of the clearing, watching him. Big, broad, bearded. The beard was white blonde streaked with iron gray.
thick enough to hide the shape of his jaw. His hair was long and tied back, not neatly, but with the practicality of someone who didn't care what strangers thought. His face was lined, not just with age, but with lived weather. Old scars traced pale lines across his brow and cheek. His eyes, though, were not old. They were sharp, clear, quiet.
The man held a walking staff of his own, gnarled wood worn smooth by years. He stood like someone who had never needed to announce strength. It simply lived in him, settled and unquestionable.
You're loud,
The man said.
His voice was deep and even, not unkind, not welcoming either. Just factual, like naming the weather.
This is a normally quiet place.
Thurston swallowed.
I was sent
The man's gaze slid to the staff in Thurston's hand, and something changed, subtle as a shadow shifting.
by Queen Valera.
Thurston added. A long pause.
Valera.
The man said, tasting the name as if it carried history.
So she wears a crown now.
He looked back at Thurston.
And she sent you.
Then he nodded at the staff.
And she sent that.
Thurston tightened his grip.
She said you could teach me.
A faint exhale that might have been a laugh if the man were in the habit of spending laughter.
Queens say a lot.
He turned and began walking toward the hut, as if Thurston was expected to follow. Thurston did, limping slightly, anger and relief tangling in his chest.
Inside the hut was plain. A cot, a table, a stone hearth with ash from old fires, shelves carved from roots and rough boards, holding jars of herbs and stones that looked too ordinary to matter. Everything was sparse, brutally neat, and deeply lived in.
The man set his walking staff against the wall and began pouring hot water into a simple cup.
No rush, no ceremony. Thurston stood awkwardly, suddenly feeling like a child in a stranger's house.
You have a name?
Thurston asked. The man took a slow sip, then set the cup down.
Bram,
He said. Thurston waited for more. Bram did not offer it.
After a moment, Thurston's patience snapped. He'd walked through a void and survived a mountain, and slept under a rock, and almost died twice.
Valera tells me you are a retired warrior.
Bram's eyes lifted. Calm, measuring.
I laid down my weapons once.
Bram said.
They didn't stay down.
That was the closest thing to a joke Bram had given so far. And it wasn't really a joke at all,
She believes you can help me.
Thurston said.
Bram looked at him for a long moment, then looked at the staff.
I can see why she thinks you need help.
Bram said.
He stepped closer and circled Thurston slowly. Not like a predator, but like a carpenter walking around warped wood deciding where it would split.
You're too big for your own balance.
Bram said. Thurston blinked.
Excuse me?
Bram's gaze remained level.
You move like a man who expects the world to give way.
He said.
I imagine that. Sometimes it does. But sometimes it breaks you for the arrogance. Am I correct?
Thurston felt heat rise in his face.
The Bane Walkers.
I know what they are.
Bram cut in, but not sharply. Just final.
Their stench lingers on you. I've smelled them before. Long ago.
He touched nothing, but his presence made Thurston feel like the staff was suddenly heavier, as if it were embarrassed.
They got the better of you.
Bram said. Thurston stiffened.
Yeah, they made me kneel before them.
They didn't make you kneel.
Bram corrected.
They made you believe kneeling was inevitable.
Yes, I know they made me believe kneeling was my only option. The idea is still very unclear, but I get it.
Thurston stared. Bram's voice softened by half a degree.
That's what too much confidence does to a man who hasn't found his talent to back it.
Thurston's throat tightened.
So you'll train me?
Bram's eyes narrowed slightly. Not anger, something more tired.
I don't train people.
Bram said.
I'm not a kennel master. I'm not a king's instructor. I'm not the queen's instructor either.
Valera had called him a peaceful soul. Standing here, Thurston could see it. The quiet in Bram wasn't weakness. It was his deliberate choice. He was a man who had spent a long time deciding what kind of violence he would allow into his life.
I didn't come here to bother you.
Thurston said, voice rough.
I came because I can't be that helpless again.
Bram studied him. The silence stretched until Thurston felt exposed.
Finally, Bram looked away, toward the small window where the river's roar could be heard faintly.
Valera always had a way of dropping storms at people's feet and calling it fate.
Bram said softly. Thurston felt something twist in his chest.
Yes, I think that sums her up nicely.
Bram didn't answer directly. He picked up his cup again and took a slow sip.
I knew a woman,
He said finally.
a long time ago. She had golden hair and a crown that lost meaning as her title had been stripped away.
Thurston waited. Bram said nothing more. The silence was not empty. It was full of things Bram refused to hand to anyone. Thurston's voice dropped.
She opened the veil for me.
He said.
She did it herself for me to enter this realm. She said, when I had learned enough, I'd be able to return, and I would need no one else to be able to do it.
Bram's eyes flicked to him. Something like respect lived there. Respect and a shadow of worry.
That places you in a desperate situation.
Bram said.
I know.
Thurston admitted. Bram nodded slowly as if confirming what he already knew.
You're a risk.
Thurston bristled.
Thanks.
Bram's mouth twitched, not quite a smile.
Not an insult, a fact.
He gestured to the staff.
That thing is not silent. In some sense, it is alive.
Every time you swing it in battle, the elements of magic hears it.
Thurston's grip tightened.
So what do I do?
Bram looked him over again. The cut on his shin, the stiffness in his shoulders, the exhaustion in his eyes.
You rest.
Bram said.
Thurston stared.
Rest.
Yes,
Bram said simply.
you came here expecting punishment. You think suffering is proof you deserve help.
Thurston didn't know what to say to that.
Bram moved toward the door.
Eat and warm yourself by my fire.
He said.
Then we'll talk.
Thurston followed, bewildered, as Bram stepped outside into the clearing.
The river roared beyond the tree line, louder now, like it wanted to be part of the conversation.
Bram stopped and pointed. Not dramatically, just indicating.
Tomorrow,
Bram said.
you'll step into that river.
Thurston stared at the white water. The current churned over boulders, fast and cold and indifferent. Standing in it looked like volunteering for being swept away.
That's the lesson?
Thurston asked. Bram looked back, eyes calm as stone.
No,
He said.
that's the question.
Thurston frowned.
What question?
Bram's gaze held him.
Are you a man who can stay where he chooses?
Bram said quietly.
Or are you a man who moves wherever fear pushes him?
The words hit Thurston harder than the cold had. Bram turned away then, walking back toward the hut.
Sleep.
The river will still be there in the morning. It has patience.
He paused at the door, just long enough to add,
So do the things hunting you.
Then he went inside, leaving Thurston alone beneath the massive tree, the violet moon hanging above like a watchful eye, the river's roar filling the night with relentless motion.
Thurston stood there, staff warm in his grip, feeling the shape of his future pressing down into his bones. Stillness, he realized, wasn't the absence of motion. Stillness was defiance against everything that wanted to sweep you away. In the Blackwood. The Blackwood did not receive visitors so much as tolerate them, and it did so with the slow contempt of something vast and ageless.
To Havner, it felt as if the forest itself breathed against his back. A whisper of old leaves, the hush of moss swallowing sound. Light, if it existed, was filtered to a perpetual indigo, making day and night indistinct.
Lyra moved ahead, barely touching ground, as if she'd learned how to walk without apologizing to roots. Havner followed with disciplined care, his steps placed like memory.
For hours they spoke little.
Then Lyra said without turning,
You still smell of royal blood.
Havner's jaw tightened.
That is the past. I have traded that time.
Lyra's mouth curled, not quite amusement.
Old paths don't forgive new boots.
They pressed deeper. The ground became wet and spongy. The air grew colder in pockets, then warmer again, as if the forest was breathing in uneven lungs. Once Havner saw a mark carved into bark, an old hunting sigil of the king, half overgrown but still visible. The forest remembered. It didn't approve. Lyra stopped near a lightning-split tree and crouched, fingers brushing moss.
This is wrong and dark, but it isn't the well.
she murmured.
Havner looked at her.
No.
He assured her. Lyra nodded.
The well is a wound that stays open. This is a scar that keeps itching.
She rose and scanned the shadows.
The king seeded these woods with comforts for dark things.
She said.
Little nests, places where the air is easier for them to breathe.
Havner felt it then. A wrongness, like a cold smell that didn't belong. Dry rot, grave dust.
Something's coming.
Lyra didn't deny it.
Yes,
The shapes formed between trees like fog learning to hate. Not fen wraiths exactly, not full spirits, not anchored. These were thinner things, draped in memory, stitched together from old fear, sorrow, hate, and regret.
One drifted close, and Havner heard a whisper that sounded like his own voice from years ago.
Run.
Another whispered something worse.
Hunt.
Havner drew his sword. The elven steel made no sound. It didn't need to.
Lyra knocked an arrow, Warden's light tracing faint silver along the shaft.
these aren't guardians.
Lyra said quietly.
They're scavengers. They smell you, Havner.
Havner's mouth went tight.
They smell us.
Lyra's eyes flicked to him. She shrugged. The first ethereal scavenger did not attack.
It approached and passed through. Lyra felt it brush her shoulder like a hand she hadn't given permission to touch. Cold, intimate, wrong. The silver of her arrowhead flared on instinct as she spun, loosing the arrow before thought could catch up. The smoky scavenger unraveled. Then 5 more flowed into the space it vacated. They came like fog poured downhill, not charging, not forming ranks, but gathering, pressing, testing. Their shapes were unfinished things, faces emerging only long enough to whisper before dissolving again. Havner wielded his steel as the temperature dropped hard enough to sting.
More are coming.
He said unnecessarily.
The forest answered in spades. More poured from between the trees, not forward, not back,
Just everywhere. Lyra fired twice more, silver light punching holes through the swarm, but each opening closed almost immediately, the scavengers folding back in on themselves and reforming. They didn't claw, they didn't strike. They leaned. Pressure settled behind Lyra's eyes, sharp and invasive. The whispers multiplied, layering over one another until words lost shape.
warden, judge, killer.
She staggered as a memory punched through her defenses. Not recent, not clear. A forest burning, screams swallowed by smoke. A choice made too late to save anyone. Her breath hitched despite herself.
Lyra!
Havner barked. She shook it off with a snarl and fired again, the arrow flaring brighter than it should have. The light tore through 3 forms in a single line, dispersing them in a ripple of silver ash. Too much light. The recoil snapped back through her arm and chest. She hissed as pain flared beneath her ribs.
The swarm knew something, and it shifted. Her pain revealed her past. The tangled mess of twisted bodies and faces pushed toward her, and now the whispers came sharper.
How many did you condemn? How many did you decide were worth less? Lyra backed up instinctively, and the ground gave way beneath her boot, slick with rot and moss. Havner caught her before she fell, hauling her clear as his blade passed through another clutch of scavengers. Cold flooded his arm, sliding past muscle and bone, sinking straight into memory. He saw the king again, heard the order, felt the moment he didn't refuse.
Oathbreaker! The swarm breathed. Havner roared and charged, not to defeat them, but to break their momentum. His steel carved space in front of them, but the scavengers flowed around, reforming, tightening.
We're not winning this.
Lyra snapped, breath ragged, eyes flashing too bright.
That way. Move.
They turned together, not retreating cleanly, not choosing better ground, just running. The forest resisted immediately. Roots grabbed at boots, branches lashed like reaching hands. The scavengers surged after them, faster now, closer, their whispers pressing until thought slipped.
Lyra loosed arrows behind her without looking, bursts of silver slowing pursuit, but never stopping it. Then the path vanished. One moment they were on the king's old trail, narrow, deliberate. The next, it split, twisted, dissolved into deadfall and shadow.
Havner.
Lyra shouted.
I know.
He panted, skidding sideways as the ground sloped unexpectedly steep.
He veered hard left, dragging Lyra with him as the swarm surged where they had been, colliding with a snarl of fallen trees and stone.
They plunged downslope until Havner caught a massive root wrapped around a moss-slick boulder, one hand locking into it as he hauled Lyra against him. The scavengers poured past, not stopping, not lingering, just sweeping onward like a tide rolling back to sea. When the ground finally leveled, Havner rolled them clear, both gasping, hearts hammering in the sudden quiet. Lyra pressed a hand to her side, breathing hard, eyes unfocused a heartbeat too long.
They went on without us.
She murmured.
Yes,
Havner said grimly.
and if we hadn't broken when we did, they'd have carried us with them.
He took a breath, steadying himself, then added dryly,
A very unpleasant outcome for sure.
The silence that followed was heavy, the wrong kind of quiet. The forest felt altered now. Paths unfamiliar, angles subtly wrong. Lyra straightened, forcing steadiness back into her shoulders.
I lost the trail.
Havner closed his eyes briefly, breathing through the cold lodged under his skin. When he opened them, his gaze sharpened, reading bark, slope, wind, the quiet language of the ground.
Lyra studied him.
Can you find it again?
Havner didn't answer immediately. His hesitation told her more than words ever could. They both exhaled at the same time, looked at each other, and took a few moments to think and catch their breath.